So we thought it'd be a good opportunity just to share the work that we've done, in our trust programs over the course of the last 12 months, and to bring that to life. Dan from Woodlands and Antonia from Pioneer and John Culpin, who was here from Anglian, have agreed to join us just to sort of share their experiences. So sharing that, be useful to hear about what we're doing, and the others when they join, if they can join, to hear what we've done, but then have that exemplified by people who've been on the program. So we sort of subheaded it Strategic Trust Leadership Beyond the Crisis. So we launched our what we call Leading a Whole Education in Trust, or LAWET. We launched it last year as a pilot, not knowing at the point at which we launched it that 6 months in it would become overtaken like everything else by COVID. But we're trying to very much keep the eye on the strategic focus of the work that you do, whilst they're being aware and conscious of all of that operational stuff that's going on in the background. Welcome and introduction. So I'm James Pope. I am co-exec lead of Whole Education, and I'll talk about what Whole Education is in a minute. But does everybody else want to just do a really quick introduction of who you are and what your role is? Maddie, so you're next on my screen, Maddie, so do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, my name is Maddie. I have just started working at Whole Education a couple of weeks ago, and very excited to be supporting James in running this great program.
Fabulous, thanks Maddie. Dan, you're next on my screen.
My name's Dan Morrow. I'm the trust leader for Woodlands in Bexley and North Kent, and from January we'll be taking on the Dartmoor Multi-Academy Trust. So Sharon certainly wants some conversations with you as coming your way soon. And yeah, it's been a real privilege to be part of the Whole Education agenda for the last 12 months and probably one of the best bits of learning I've done for a long time.
Lovely, thank you Dan. And Sharon, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, I'm Sharon Philpott. I'm CEO of Victoria Academies Trust. So we've got 9 primary schools across the Midlands.
Fabulous. Antonia, you're next.
Sure. So I'm co-CEO of Pioneer Educational Trust. We're a small mat in Berkshire. So we've got 2 schools in Slough and 1 in Windsor and Maidenhead. And yeah, we've been part of the LAWET programme for the past year and found it incredibly beneficial. So very happy to be here today to share our experiences.
Lovely. Thank you, Antonia. And John, last but not least.
Good afternoon or good evening. Apologies for being slightly late there. Despite hopefully talking a little bit about how we've embraced technology since we've been in the programme, I couldn't get any of it to work. So I'm John Culpin. I'm CEO of Anglian Learning. We're a trust of 13 schools based in Cambridgeshire, North Essex and West Suffolk. We've been part of the LAWET programme for I think about 18 months now. And yeah, it's been absolutely superb and looking forward to talking about it this evening.
Lovely, thank you, John. So we thought we've just talked tonight, and obviously very informal, but we have given an agenda. So just about Whole Education, who we are, what we do, and I think you all know a little bit about that already. The Leading Whole Education and Trust, the programme and its elements, what we were hoping to achieve with it in its first year. And we thought we'd spend the bulk of the meeting getting reflections from John, Antonia and Dan. And what we're looking to do to support the priorities through LAWET in the year ahead, in what we appreciate will be a really challenging year, sort of operationally and in the sort of management of the situation that everybody is in, but also sort of keeping an eye on the longer game, keeping an eye on the strategic developments that we know that all trust leaders are really passionate about. So Whole Education, we've done a lot of work on this over the course of the last sort of 3-4 months. We've tested our vision and mission, what we're all about, and the vision, as it says, we are looking to build towards an education system that inspires all young people to thrive in learning, life and work. I don't think anybody in the education system would necessarily disagree with that, that in terms of what we would want our education system to be. But I think we're conscious that there are different ways of doing that, and what we're really interested in as a network of schools and trusts, a national network of schools and trusts, is finding out where that really great practice is, and looking at it through the frame of what we define as a whole education. And I suppose because of that, we're as a network, we're pretty clear that actually the schools and trusts that work within our network, and that's about 150 schools nationally, but we actually work with hundreds of other schools, through the work that we do in localities and through our programs, products and services, that they're all pretty values aligned with us. And I'll talk about what I mean by that in a second. And our mission is to collaborate with leaders at all levels across schools and trusts so that they are empowered to provide a high quality whole education. And, you know, again, the trusts and the schools that we work with, because their values align, we know that that's what they want as well. But we aim to do that through the power of the network. And I think, well, you know, one of the things that is not entirely unique about us, but is unique about the whole education network is that we don't tell schools or trusts how to do it. And I think, you know, that's fundamentally quite important, because I think there is a lot of being told how to do it in our education system. But actually we believe that the expertise and the skill and the experience of leaders at all levels within our education system, the answers to what we want our schools to become and how they can provide a whole education for young people actually can come from within the system. And what's important from a networking point of view within that is to connect people together so that they can really share what they are doing and share those bits of practice. But more importantly than that, to move into the space where we're testing the values and the principles that underpin that practice, and that we're looking at those as the things that should be shared. But that's what the whole education network is all about. Oh, go back up a slide. No, where have I gone? So I've got an incredibly sensitive mouse, as you can tell. So what do we mean by a whole education? We do define it. I think, you know, if we said to people in the education system, do you believe in a whole education? Most people would say, yeah. You know, I think the reality is that some on a spectrum of what people believe in, I think some would be closer aligned to what we define it as than others would. But, you know, it is a whole education. And so therefore we think it is one which develops the range of skills, qualities and knowledge. And the learners need to thrive in life, learning and work. And so we don't think it's one or the other, this sort of running from one side of the ship to the other around, is it skills or is it knowledge? Is it qualities? Actually, we think it's all of those things. We think it's one that makes learning relevant and engaging for young people so that they can take ownership of their own learning. They can have agency in their learning. We think that's really crucial. And we think a whole education is one that supports learning across various settings. So it's not just in school, it could be online, it could be outside, at home and through volunteering and work. And I think what's important about those three is that we've tested those with the network. And certainly if you look at the last one, you think, oh, that's, you know, that's convenient. That's in the world that we currently live in. But actually these were the principles of a whole education that were set 10 years ago when whole education started. So, you know, this isn't about jumping on the bandwagon. We've held these things core since whole education was first formed out of a project with the RSA back in 2010. So, you know, as an organisation that came out of that project, I think it's fair to say that those three principles have really stood the test of time. In terms of trust work, what we realised strategically as an organisation about 24 months ago is that increasingly our schools were in trusts. So whereas there had been a network of schools at primary and secondary level, because of the changes of the last decade, actually, I think 90% of our schools now operate in trusts. And, you know, there are particular, as you all well know, so I'm teaching grandmothers to suck eggs here, but, you know, you all know that there are particular challenges of, as leaders of an organisation, a school, it's challenging to, you know, get your vision and your values and the things that you think are important going in one school. You know, you scale that up at trust level. And so we recognised that there were some specific things that our trust was saying it would be really useful if we could network about these things, and actually be really useful if we could see how other trusts are doing this. So last year was our pilot year, and it was developed with a group of trusts who were already in the network, as John has alluded to, and then various trusts came on across the course of the year, down at Woodlands and Antonio at Pioneer being examples of that. And we've got about 15 trusts engaged for the year ahead, but actually we're looking to grow that a little bit. And we think the work that's being done across those trusts is really valuable, and we want to expand that out into other trusts and to attract other people to join us. But essentially it's built around the best principles of whole education practice. So underpinning all of it is relationship management and coaching support. We're not an arm's length network. We like to really know our schools and we know our school leaders, and we like to know what their priorities are, and we like to know what they're focused on. So all of the trusts engaged for this year are having diagnostic calls at the moment so we can find out where they are, both with COVID, but also in their longer term strategic development. And we call it coaching support. It's possibly a bit of a misnomer, but You know, we have check-in calls regularly. You know, we want to find out what people's experience has been on the different elements of the program, what, you know, what it made them think about, what they've learned from it, what they're taking forward. I suppose the key bones of it are, we do learning exchange visits. So again, we're a network, and actually a lot of what we do is about getting people in the network to show off. And I don't say that shyly. I don't think there is enough showing off in our education system. There's a lot of, these are the things that we need to develop and improve, but actually there's not enough of the celebrating of the things that we're really, really good at. So underpinning those trust learning exchange visits is a model of appreciative inquiry. So it's actually saying, do you know what, you tell us what you think you're really good at in the frame of a whole education. And what we'll do is we'll test that with other leaders visiting from other trusts, and they can learn from it, and you can develop your practice even further. So we have that really sort of collaborative approach. And as it says in the next bullet point, so we support effective collaboration with regular virtual check-ins. That was part, came about actually as the COVID response. So we weren't doing those, but actually we then started doing those post-March every week. Actually, we started off with, and we're running them every 2 weeks. And actually, it's an opportunity just to, you know, to come into a safe space together with other trust leaders and go, or to go, this is going really well, actually, and we wanted to share it with other people. So again, the challenges and the support. The other thing that's been bought, that's developed for the year ahead, is the monthly Trust Influence Forum. So one of the things that came out of last year, as a group of values-aligned trust leaders, people were saying, actually, it'd be really good if we could start to do some thought leadership and develop some thinking around some really key issues. And so we've got that in place for this year as well. And I'll talk about those a little bit later on. Some of our trusts have said they'd really like to go a bit deeper on the appreciative inquiry peer review. So actually, you know, we can do a little bit of that in 3 trust learning exchange visits across the year. Actually, some trusts have said, actually, be really interesting. We'd like you to come in and we'd like to build an appreciative inquiry, really challenging appreciative inquiry review process. And so we're looking at building that with a number of trusts this year. And some of our trusts said, actually, you know, it's really great, but actually we struggle a little bit with capacity to do some of the things that we've been talking about across last year. What would be really beneficial if we had some regular sort of change leadership support, so additional capacity could come in and help us structure that longer term strategic development. So that's how it's framed out for the year ahead. I think I've probably covered most of that, but those are just a quick overview of that. And I'll pick out, I suppose, the additional bit. So we set up Lowet last year, and we had loads of trusts sign up. It was really, really fantastic and exciting. We had trust joiners during the year, but then one of the things that developed, and I suppose I posit this as we're always looking for opportunities to add to what our offer. But the Apple International Visit Programme was a really exciting opportunity that sort of came our way last summer, and we recognised really quickly that we could bolt that into the trust offer. And we took a group of 20 trust leaders out to California last February, at the very beginnings of the wave of the COVID, as COVID hit around the world. I think, John, we escaped from San Francisco just in the nick of time.
Just in time.
As I remember rightly. But that was, and John may expand on this, but that was just a fantastic opportunity. We haven't just bolted it in there, it's embedded in the programme. So actually what Apple are looking to do is to work with leaders across the world and look at actually how can we look at how the changing world in which we're living in, how can Apple supports the development of that in education for the betterment of young people into the future. And that was really high quality inputs from Apple executives from all sorts of different departments, but also a great opportunity for the trust leaders to sort of build social capital with each other and spend time talking in depth about some of the things that they were doing within their trusts. And we will be doing that again this year, COVID permitting. And we're in conversation with Apple at the moment that if that is not possible, then actually we're going to do something in the virtual space across 3 or 4 days. So we'll still get those really high quality inputs from those Apple executives. So there will be something from Apple. I suppose the important thing to say is if other opportunities arise that we think are really fantastic and contributing to what we're trying to do, we will also include those. There are themes, although I think John, Antonio and Dan again may comment on this in a minute, but you know, we're not rigidly beholden to these. We co-construct what we're looking at with our trusts. So it's not a case of, you know, this is what we're delivering and we want you to, that's it, that's what you have to do. So I think it's fair to say we probably spent more time looking at vision, values and culture last year, and autonomy versus prescription, because those were the things that the trust really wanted to focus on. And I think what's important in that is it's not, you know, it's not sort of, you're not starting from scratch. You've got visions, values and culture. So it was about appreciating what you've got and appreciating the impact of what trusts have got within their trusts, but then comparing that to others and doing sort of a sense check on it, and then also seeing what the impact of it is. So, and that's the approach that we take with all of it. So, you know, we will co-construct, those are the themes from last year. They're the same themes rolling forward, but in the diagnostic calls, we will listen to what you're saying to us are your priorities, and then we will build the sort of program around that. But those are some of the key things that our trust told us. These are the big issues that we're grappling with, and you know, some success or great success in some of them, and it's the opportunity to have those conversations with other trust leaders who are grappling with the same things. A bit of feedback, but then we'll take some live feedback from the room. So these we did our evaluations in April and May, and you know, those are two of Alex, who is on the call, I think somewhere, has disappeared into the background. But Alex pulled these two out of a list of about 25 really positive comments we had from people's experiences. And I won't read them out because you're highly intelligent people and you can read yourself, but it gives you a flavour for the type of feedback that we'd had, and what in terms of what we were trying to do. I'm going to pause there and sort of bring Dan, Antonio and John in to sort of share reflections, and then I'll talk about, you know, what we think is unique about the trust offer at Whole Ed. You know, let's start with I'll start with the question sort of, so you know, why is whole education important to you? And John, if I start with you, you know, and I don't mean whole education the organisation, although you might touch on that. I mean whole education as a theme. You know, why is that important to you, John, and how did Louet support you with that across the last year?
Well, I think as an organisation, we've always made it very clear that we're looking for a quality of experience and a quality of opportunity for our pupils, which obviously goes way beyond SATs, GCSE and A-level. And that's been our kind of raison d'etre really since we were formed in September 2016 as a trust. And what whole education has done, and the Louet programme in particular, has enabled us to really explore that in depth, and actually in a sense not simply pay that kind of belief in a broader education and not just paying that kind of lip service. And in that sense, you know, having those quality conversations with people who think the same in terms of actually that broad and balanced curriculum, I know it's a bit of a trite phrase, but you know, a really rich curriculum has been one of the things that's been most beneficial, say, over the 18 months we've been members of whole education, but certainly over the last 12 months. And I suppose from the perspective of the trust leadership team, for those school leaders who've engaged in this as well through our work in the Louet programme, it's enabled them to understand really in a bit of clarity what we mean by whole education, and in particular trying to develop those deeper skills in pupils which transcend you know, sort of the silos of examination subjects or you know, standard approaches in primary school, etc. That's been the real benefit, is those sort of quality conversations with like-minded people.
That's great, John. Thank you. And Antonio, sort of same question for you. You know, sort of why is whole education important to Pioneer, and what was the highlight for you from the year that we've just had?
Yeah, sure. So we fundamentally believe that the curriculum shouldn't be narrowed down, and we certainly shouldn't be exam factories, and all of our schools believe in developing the child academically and personally around all of the, you know, in the round. I think that working with Louet last year enabled us to really give life and example to that, in the, you know, to inspire our colleagues. I know that Eddie, my co-CEO, loved the Apple experience and got a huge amount out of that. For me, whether it was through the conference, which was brilliant, the conference was really inspiring and revolutionary for me and our trust, or whether it was the weekly calls during the COVID situation, there was always a level of inspiration, being able to hear from other people in trust who were coming at things from the same values, position. And certainly I think through that collaboration, I think that it's helped us to take any cap off our ambitions, and we've just gone further and further and bigger in what we've been able to work on and achieve. And so we've got a huge number of things that have come out of this collaboration that I might not go into now, but if when we come on to another question, there might be an opportunity. But there's we have very, very big plans for things for each of our schools that we're going to be doing that have really inspired colleagues, the seeds of which came from Lowit.
Brilliant, that's great, Antonia, thank you. And Dan, same question for you and Woodlands.
I think it's very similar to what John and Antonia have already said, in the sense that it's about a reinforcement of culture, and what I mean by that is education in itself is quite a disputed territory often, and sometimes the decisions around education can come up into really quite unhelpful binaries. And what I really love about whole education is it just moves past that into a where we find our vision and our values coalescing. And on one level, that sounds quite ethereal, doesn't it? But actually, what it translated to, especially during COVID lockdown, but more generally is, that meant my head teachers who did those weekly calls, who were absolutely up against it and were feeling it, knew instantly it was a safe space, because those shared values meant, without being trite, it was really interesting watching a journey of my heads when we were having discussions, generally reporting back, going from talking about whole education as they to we. And I think that was a product of the summer, that really what we understood about our engagement and what the culture isn't that you're joining another organisation, it's that you're becoming part of a group of like-minded and like-thinking. But the sort of caveat to that is it isn't all fluffy kumbaya. There's plenty of really decent challenge, and the decent challenge is exactly what it needs to be, which is it shifts thinking, and therefore it shifts the impact on children, because it comes from a place of safety around our values. It isn't one that feels threatening or ego-based, and I think therefore as leaders we connect in a way that I find I'm not able to necessarily do in different vehicles and organisations, because the structures as well as the culture don't really promote it in the way that I think the Lowit whole programme does. Sorry, I got really rambly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally made sense, Dan, and thank you very much. And I was picking up, Antonia, on your hint and Dan yours, in terms of, because I don't think it is soft and fluffy, and we certainly hope it's not. And I think sometimes that there can be a perception of whole education that it is, and in its broadest sense, but also organisationally. And I think we're always keen to challenge that, because I think we hope that we occupy a space, because we're not telling you how to do it, that we are challenging thinking, and we're creating a space where people can question their thinking in that way, but it also have real impact, because it can't just be a theoretical or theological conversation that's going on and it doesn't actually change anything on the ground. So it'd be really interesting to sort of know, what have been really sort of real and tangible impacts. And I think I would couch that within, we're not looking to change the world overnight. You're dealing with really large, complex organizations. And we know that, you're not going to be sort of necessarily have delivered your whole sort of vision and strategy overnight. That's, it's about next steps, and it's about what you're going to prioritize next to achieve the things that you want to achieve. So, but it'd be interesting to know what some of those things were for you last year. And John, if we could start with you on that would be great.
I mean, I'd echo all of those points. And, again, I found the conference really inspirational space to be in. Partly because of the exposure to some leading thinkers, really. I'm actually sort of, coming back to that point there about it actually being quite a challenging experience, and some of the questions that are being posed about the balance, and you put it on one of your previous slides, James, between autonomy and prescription, and some really quite challenging questions around that, challenging questions around culture, challenging questions about how we develop our people, in the organisation. And all of those things have now actually translated into our strategic priorities as a trust this year. We're having to modify them slightly because it's quite difficult sometimes to actually at the moment get alongside people, quite literally. But it certainly has made us think completely differently really about what it actually means to be a civic trust or multi-academy trust, call it whatever you will, which actually unifies those people with a common sense of purpose. And as a part of that actually is now we're having conversations with Dr. Karen Edge, one of the people who actually presented at the conference, to talk about how we develop our people and actually how we develop leaders. The other one I would point out the Apple conference in Cupertino. Between the Saturday we arrived and the Thursday we finished, and I stayed on for San Francisco afterwards, which was very nice as well. But actually during the period we were there, that is the most sort of valuable, insightful, professional development I've had in my career. And part of that was around exposure to Apple's thinking, and not just simply, please buy as many iPads from us as possible. But determined that was not going to be the case. And what have I done in the last week? Just ordered another 200 iPads. But actually, it was more talking through with Apple what their values were, how they translated those values to their products, their workforce, the idea of an Apple university, which is kind of something we've also adapted now, but actually just what is the impact of technology in education and so on. And that, again, has really quite transformed a lot of our thinking. And also, while I was there, it was just, again, the opportunity to talk to others. And so you had the actual sessions with Apple. As important were the conversations that were taking place over coffee or were taking place in the evenings, over dinner, in the bar, whatever it might be. And also, as I say, some quite intense debates. I remember having quite an intense debate with you, James, there about the direction of whole education and schools and so on. So, they're just some of the things we take out. And I suppose the other sort of key takeaway really would be the visits to the schools. And obviously you have to curtail that slightly or do it in a different way really. But the visits to XP school, and I can't remember what Sharon's school actually.
Keys Federation.
Thank you. Absolutely incredibly insightful and valuable for us as an organisation. Just to sit down, talk through people and see the practice they've put into place. We gain so much from it. And again, even today, I was talking to, like my deputy CEOs, director of secondary education, director of primary education, and we kept referring back to the things that we'd picked up in that course last year, and how that was still sort of shaping us going forward. So yeah, they were just some of the sort of takeaways, but it is, as much as the actual meeting with people and making that connection and people can work with you, it's actually sitting alongside other people in the room and actually having quite intense debates in the way that Dan was saying, in quite a safe space as well. I think that's very important. That's
great, John. Thank you. And I suppose useful to hear that feedback, but it's also useful from the point of view of, coming back to what whole education is, and it is first and foremost a network, and we facilitate a network, and that's really, really important, because although we offer lots of programs, the reality is at the core of what we do is connecting people together. And we facilitate that connection, but we also look for that connection then to move out into other spaces. And I know that there's been various bits of work that have been going on trust to trust as a consequence of those links that have been made, and that's absolutely fantastic. And we're really pleased to hear that happening. Thank you for that, John. And Tony, what about you? What you talked about some big stuff that you've got coming up?
Yeah, we do have some big stuff. I'd echo exactly what John said about all of it, but especially about how the work that we've done with whole education has informed our strategic priorities moving forward. So one of the things that I was very inspired by when we heard from somebody who spoke at the conference was around how they were supporting disadvantaged, pupils who are disadvantaged in their particular area. So we're in the process of setting up a charity to have a supplementary school and make sure that all children, no matter what their backgrounds are, get to experience all of the educational experiences that the others do, the ones that can, so really, addressing that socioeconomic disadvantage, piece around that. We're engaging in spirals of inquiry on the back of this space as well this year. And one of our schools is celebrating its 50th birthday this year, and we have been working with a local sixth form college that's an agricultural based college, and we're setting up a farm on the site of that school, you know, for the kids to be engaged in and have that sense of community and that sense of, you know, all of the things that, you know, all of the benefits that the farm will bring. So as I said, I think it's about uncapping any ambition and, you know, just really going for it and having, you know, big aspirations for, you know, what we can achieve with our schools. So some tangible things there. I could talk about all the other ways in which it's informed, you know, strategy and working with our people and things like that. But in terms of some kind of tangible projects, those are just a couple.
That's great. Thank you, Antonia. And Dan, same for you. And obviously, you know, you've got Woodlands, and you're moving on to another trust, and I know you're keen to get them involved as quickly as possible as well. But what about Woodlands and the sort of tangible impacts that you've seen?
That's what's quite interesting, because I'm currently leading a trust which is at one stage of a journey, if you like, and then taking on one in January, which will be at a different start. And I think that for me it's twofold. So Julie Carson, the Director of Education, went on the Apple trip, and which I was very proud of myself for, by the way, just saying. Good, give opportunities to all colleagues. And actually, do you know what? It was transformational for her and her leadership, because she said it was like a mini MBA in a very short amount of time, but and in a really intense way. But, you know, as her colleague and someone who works with her, her refinement of thinking strategically and how she started to adapt her language was really interesting to watch, and actually really did elevate our own challenge and support for each other. So strategically there. And again, yes, John, I've just laid out for a fair few hundred iPads as well, because the other thing actually was, and again, apologies for some cynicism here, James, but you know, I'm always very honest. When I looked at things like that, I was like, well, is it one of those shiny things, get people signed up, they all go off to San Fran, happy days. And actually, the gains in terms of efficiency and effectiveness already, in terms of our business administration, the way we organize, the way we looked at things, the fact that Apple is still supporting with various bits, it's been really interesting. But it isn't about the tech, it's about the culture and the information that informs it. And actually, you know, if I was a little naysaying about it, and I wasn't, but you know, some might be. I
was a little skeptical, Dan.
It was exceptional, and it was exceptional as well to see a leader sort of come back and, you know, come back and be so inspired to then create a 3 to 5 year strategy around how to implement some of those aspects and really live by it. I mean, just very briefly, the fact that obviously the pandemic and everything then came afterwards, we were much more ready than we would have been, because thinking had already gone into it. And that's, you know, a byproduct clearly, but an important one. On the other hand, I think for myself and for the trust, it's been about civic leadership, because the space we're in as educational leaders, and especially as MAT CEOs, is one that's meant to be around liberation and freedom. And yet for a number of years, it's felt that we've got quite a tight set of expectations of how we're meant to do things and meant to perform. And, you know, if I'm really frank, at times I've marched in line because it's felt that that's what I needed to do. And actually, again, the conference, really, I sat there, and there were times where I sat there and just really felt like I hadn't done enough on what I'd actually come into education for as a leader, and I hadn't really gotten to those points of really transforming aspects, as Antonia just said about the farm. So looking at things like proper debt relief counselling for some of our parents, and really investigating those relationships with third sector bodies, which we've always got there as priorities, but within education in the last 10 years, if I'm honest, I feel like they slipped down the agenda list. And, you know, when we wrote CEFs 10 years ago, we had those community cohesion sections where we were really, you know, the Keith Ajegbo agenda around citizenship, some really, really strong aspects of what I would consider civic education, which have gone too much from the thought leadership in our system. And I think for me, it's it's been reassuring to know that there are lots of leaders who feel the same, and actually there is a sense of safety in that, but also reassurance. But there's also challenged my thinking, which has changed along the journey, because people have burst a few of my bubbles and equally have made me think differently, and that's great. And I think lastly, that sense of the fire in my belly around the civic leadership bit from the conference hasn't left me. And, you know, you want to turn that feeling of not having quite done enough into a proper legacy for your community. But I think what whole education has truly done is give the capacity to have conversations with really good people who want the best for their children and their communities in very similar ways to I want it, who have great ideas like this charity, which I will be emailing Antonio about because I'm already excited by it. And that's the whole point. And it is the whole point. It's many hands make light work, but equally there are also hands which I think then start to extend in friendship and also in support on the shoulder when needed during all of this.
That's lovely. Thank you, Dan. And thank you, Antonio and John, as well, for those lovely reflections and inputs. Sharon, have you got any sort of questions for anybody in the room around what you've heard, or any sort of details or any bigger stuff that you'd like to know a bit more about?
No, it's been really interesting actually. As a trust, we were involved in higher education a few years ago, and it's a point where we're still doing a lot of this stuff. We're still doing challenge-based curriculum. We're still looking at social change, but actually we're at a point, we've been through a journey where we've come to a point where I'm listening to this thinking, actually, yes, you're right. We've lost sight a little bit of the togetherness and the community and the network. So it's been really refreshing to hear. And for me, it's like, actually, yes, this is what we should be doing, and this is what we've lost sight of in the past couple of years a little bit as a trust. So thank you. It's been really great just listening.
Well, thank you. So what I'll do is I'm conscious of time, and it is it's a Tuesday evening at the end of a very long day. So I'll just really quickly sort of which I think these are the sort of bits about the USP really of and please, Dan, Antonio and John, sort of jump in if you think there are any others. But I think that the way that we structured it was deliberately structured to offer flexibility. It's not a CEO program. It's not a program, actually. We really struggled with, we called it a series for a while, but people didn't really say, well, what do you mean a series? I mean, ultimately, it's a series of connected events, but we're really conscious that there's a lot of stuff in that CEO development space, but actually CEOs lead trust, but they don't do it on their own. You do it with a group of other people. And so we wanted to create something that sort of deliberately structured in such a way that it offered flexibility of participation. And we had some trusts last year who sent 3 or 4 people. We had some people who sent 2. But we wanted it to be that sort of idea that you could send different people to different elements. If you wanted to attend all of it, then great. But actually, if time, the time pressure and the ability to do that sometimes is limited, then actually you could send other people who lead in your trust, and they could come back and collaborate and talk about it. And so you got that real sense of sort of bubbling ideas. Sorry, Dan, I cut across you there, I think.
No, not at all. Apology. I was just going to say, I don't think it's a program. The way I've described it to the trustees I'm going to work with, and I talk about it more generally, it's an ecosystem. It's an environment in which you can sort of thrive and find each other. And in that way, I think that's what connects the networks. I think it's sort of like the Rita Trahane idea of connecting ecosystems. But I do think it is exactly right, because it goes back to Sharon's point, which is quite often and for example, in Woodlands, we've been on a real journey over the last 3 years. And what we did for quite some time was we just look down, because we were trying to get everything right on the ground. And I think, again, that's why it's the ecosystem sense, because it's at that moment when it's right to start to look up. We never do, because we're so concentrating on making sure it gets even better, because we're in that cycle. And that's how I would sum it up. It's the ability to look upwards, and we don't get that chance anywhere near enough.
That's great. Thank you, Dan, for that. I think the other thing that is unique about it, it's not entirely unique, but I think one of the things that we're really passionate about whole education, and passionate about, when I say whole education, I mean the whole network, is my God, there is enough focus on the things that aren't working in our education system. And actually, you know, and that's fine. You know, we want to develop stuff. We want to develop stuff collaboratively and in a co-constructed way with the people who are in the network. But what there isn't enough focus on is celebrating the stuff that works really well, and then working out why it works really well. So, you know, we like to think that one of the things that's unique, it's not just about, you know, this isn't working and we need to do this, and we need, you know, that kind of deficit view of education, which you know, feels like it's become all consuming in the last decade. You know, and we want to challenge that. We want to challenge that as a group of trusts. We want to challenge it and say, hang on a minute, you know what? No, there's loads to celebrate. You know, 80 to 90% of what happens in our education system on a daily basis, especially now more than, is absolutely brilliant. You know, it's fantastic, and we want to recognise that, and we want to share that work. And again, that doesn't make it we're all happy clappy and soft and fluffy and it's all that. No, because actually within the appreciation of what's happening is the ability to then challenge how it's going to be developed even further and how we can learn from it. So we definitely take an appreciative inquiry view. And I think we offer, I'll be interested in thoughts from others on this, but I think we offer the flexibility for the experience to be tailored. You have your development priorities. We're not suddenly say rip them all up and throw them out the window. That would be madness to do that. So I think it's very much about, you know, we have our themes. We have our view of what a whole education is. We think everybody in the network agrees with that. But in terms of, you have, you know, all of our trusts and all of our schools are at different points on the spectrum in terms of their journey and where they're aiming for. There is a cohesion around the values, as everybody's alluded to, but ultimately we're not saying this is what a whole education is and this is how you do it. So therefore, all of our schools and trusts are doing it in slightly different ways, and that's great. And what that means is we have to tailor the experience. So, you know, we do try to have a really good relationship, and we try to listen to what you're telling us rather than telling you what we think is the answer. So we hope that it's very much a tailored experience for those that are participating as well. Just thought I'd flash this up, develop this as something else, but trust, influence and forum is quite important, I think, because it is new this year. We think one of the things that came out actually of the Apple visit was a group of really passionate leaders who were going, and values aligned, who were going, we want to change things. We want to change the system so that it better reflects the education that we want to be giving our young people. And so the Trust, Influence and Forums, Influence and Voice Forums will happen over the course of the year. These are the first three scheduled for the year ahead. And in the first one, we're going to be looking at actually what have we learned about remote and blended learning, and not in the really functional sense. We want people to share what they've learned, but actually, is there something in there that is a model for the future, not just as a response to COVID, but actually is going to help us to achieve the sorts of whole education that we're looking to develop within our trust. So that'll be an opportunity for some inputs from experts, but also people from the network coming together and go, well, this is what we did, and we think this was fantastic. And so we've got that sharing, but we're also talking about, okay, how does remote and blended learning become a feature of our ecosystem into the future, not just for the here and now, but into the future. Assessment won't be a surprise for you to see assessment on there. You know, I think like many others in the education system at the moment, we think now is a great opportunity to rethink assessment. Part of our whole education, I suppose, vision and mission and values and principles is that, my God, we wish we assessed, you know, and celebrated more of what our children do, rather than the very sort of narrow lens that it currently does. And so we want to look at assessment and what might an assessment system into the future look like, one that's based in the ideas of appreciative inquiry for youngsters as well, and has their voice amplified within it. And we will work together with other groups like that. So the Rethinking Assessment Group, Gwyn Apparia XP wrote a really powerful piece for the TES about how he thinks assessment should change into the future. And we know that other trust leaders within the network will have strong views on that as well. And we want, you know, whole education to be saying, actually, this is what we think. And so we start to apply pressure to changes to the assessment system and challenging paradigms around it. And then the one in December will focus very much on, we've got Philippa Cordingley, who's done an awful lot of work with trusts in the very early days of trusts. We've talked to her about this notion of prescription versus autonomy. And she uses the phrase cohesion. Actually, how do you get cohesion across trusts? And she sort of worked very early on with trust leaders in the Midlands around how they got that sense of cohesion and how they did it through CPDL. So how CPDL can become a vehicle for ensuring that your vision is trust-wide and you've got that really cohesion, everybody falling in behind the vision and the mission and values of your trust. And she's going to share her learning from that research that she did over a number of years with trusts in the very early days. And that's it. That's the webinar. That's what whole education trust membership is all about. The core of it is LOWET. There are the additional elements of peer review if people want to get involved in that, or change leadership if people want that additional support and that additional capacity. But I will pause there, and any thoughts or reflections from people in the room, anything anybody would like to add, or Sharon, any particular questions you'd want about, you know, the LOWET program moving forward. Antonia.
Yeah, it's just one other thing. What I felt last year, and what I should think is one of the fantastic bits about LOWET, is actually how it's contributing to shaping the educational landscape. So by trusts and schools being involved in this and being like-minded, and therefore spreading, you know, their best practice and sharing their ideas and their philosophy on education, I think that is help, you know, that can lead positively, can't it, to actually shaping the educational landscape in a way in which we can, you know, as somebody said earlier, you know, reframe not around the negative and around, you know, the accountability system and all of those things, but actually what it is that motivates us and what an education system should be like. So I certainly had that feeling that I was part of, you know, a group where we were helping to shape what education looks like, as well as just being involved in education.
Brilliant, thanks, Antonia. Dan.
I think one of the other things about the organisation is it offers generally a little bit of a protection around our roles as civic leaders. I just want to give really good education to our kids, but also make sure we take care of the clear social ills we see around them, and stop pretending it's not happening or just dance around the edges, because that's not what any of us came into this for.
Yeah, that's really lovely, Dan, actually. And I think I talk a lot across all of my work about, you know, what did we come in it for? Because I think actually the reflections that you get from school leaders, head teachers and trust leaders is it's not necessarily some of the stuff that we end up doing. And that bit, somebody mentioned it earlier on about not relighting, but fanning the flames of the fire in our belly, you know, and this notion of sort of heart-led leadership. And it comes from the, you know, your gut instinct. And it's, you know, I really love the big education sort of leadership journey, that idea of, you know, head, hand and heart. You know, but I would add to that, and I said this at a conference on the weekend, I would add that, you know, head, hand and heart, and actually the fire in your belly, because I think it's those things as well. And it's really lovely to get the feedback from those of you that were on it last year, but you know, it sounds as if that's what we've achieved, and we definitely want to do more of that in the coming years, and keep that passion. You know, we're all passionate educationists at the end of the day, to keep that passion for the things that we do and celebrate the work that we do. Thank you, Dan. It's great, everybody. Enjoy your evening, and lovely to see you all, and see you soon.